We are really excited and wanted to welcome, we have Dr. Uhls joining us today, author of Media Moms and Digital Dads. And she's a friend of the Google office. She has several friends here and has been here before. We're very glad to host her again. And with that, I'll welcome her on stage.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys all hear me? And for those of you in the back, if you want a book, there's a book up front as well as some handouts. So I want to thank Nadine Shelton, Tom Williams, the Google office, and Julie Wershkin for hosting me here today. So first I want to tell you why I'm so passionate about this subject. I have always been interested in media. I started out my career working as a movie executive. I was at Sony and MGM and New Line. But when I had kids, I stepped off my movie executive path and I decided to go back to school and study adolescent development at UCLA, where I got a PhD and I totally transformed my life. And while I was getting the PhD, I also decided to study media effects on children. And I found out that I was really excited about sharing this information with parents, with anyone who was interested. And I would go out and I'd talk to parents and I'd find out they were really scared and they were very confused about the digital age. Nobody knew what to do. And I myself was scared. My kids were growing up at the same time as I was going to school. They were the digital revolution was taking off. I was studying this stuff. And as I would go out and talk to parents, I would be feeling the same issues, but what the fear didn't jive with the research that I was reading. And I was also watching my own children growing up and seeing them thriving in the digital age. So when I graduated from school, I decided to write this book, Media Moms and Digital Dads. It's about my research. It's about other people's research. It takes a lot of different topics, and I talk about, I try to bottom line it for parents, and I give takeaways and tips. So I'm trying to make it useful, but also give you the facts, both the positive and the negative. So I'm very interactive. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask me at any time. You can raise your hand or shout it out. I'll probably ask you some questions along the way. So we're going to start with a quiz, or I want you guys actually to shout out. It's not a quiz. So in the turn of the 19th century, parents were worried about a new media that teenagers loved. They were taking to it like ducks to water. What do you guys think that new media was? Please shout it out. Oh, this is too smart of an audience. Yes. I knew it was going to be a smart audience. The romantic novel. Usually people guess all sorts of other things. Nobody ever guesses the novel. And my point is that we've done this before. We freaked out about media before. And guess what? The romantic novel, one of the books they were freaking out was Jane Austen, one of the authors. I would die for my daughter to read Jane Austen now. I have a 16-year-old, by the way, and a 13-year-old. So it happens over and over and over again. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So here's a picture of kids, young girls, freaking out over the Beatles. Young girls freaking out, this was my generation, and in sync. Here they are freaking out again. Who's that? Who are they freaking out about? YouTube stars. So they're doing the same thing, except now it's YouTube stars. So even though kids seem to adapt, sometimes the older generation adapts more slowly. So this video will give you an idea. It's in German. I will translate if you need me to, but I think you can kind of figure out what's going on.
Sag mal, Papa, habe ich dich noch gar nicht gefragt. Wie kommst du denn eigentlich mit dem neuen iPad zurecht, was wir dir zum Geburtstag geschenkt haben?
She's asking him how he likes the new iPad.
Mit den ganzen Apps kommst du klar?
Was denn für Apps? Geh mal bitte einen Schritt zur Seite. So. Was is?
So clearly, that's a digital immigrant. Have you guys heard the terms digital native and digital immigrant? Has this smart audience heard that? If not, it's in the book. I explain where it comes from. So this digital immigrant is having trouble adapting, even though he thinks he's adapting. But young people adapt more quickly. So here's a photo I found, probably in Google Images, where some kids are at a birthday party, looking at the camera. Here's some kids in 2013 adapting to this new age at a party, looking at the camera, but a different camera straight in front of them. So the question is, and that's the question I posit in the book and the research that I've done and the research of other people, is childhood changing? So this video will give you an idea that perhaps it is. This is the iPad baby. Has anyone seen this video? Well, you've seen it because I've given the talk before. So you can see what she's doing. Has anyone's young baby done this yet? A really cute part's coming up. And it's one of my favorites because little kids are scientists. They really are. There's a great book called Scientist in the Crib. She's testing her finger. And it's broken there, but it works on her legs, so her finger's not broken. A dad just filmed this and put this up. A magazine is an iPad that does not work. It's going to be that way for her whole life. Probably not, but possibly. He's coded part of her OS. You guys know what that is, operating system. In human terms, what does OS mean? Could it mean? You guys, maybe it's too literal. Brain. Her brain is changing. Our brain adapts to whatever environment we're in. Your guys' brain is adapting, the kids' brains are adapting, and they're changing. But humans and our tools will still be the same with some changes. So this, for example, gives you an idea of an older tool, an older media. I hope you can read it. Books, which we started with the romantic novel. And people complain all the time that kids ignore them because they're staring at these phones, right? They're staring at these screens. But if you think about it, a book is a much better way to ignore people. So the good old days when we ignored each other with books instead of smartphones. And here is a comic that sort of does what you guys probably do, and it shows that all of these different applications, they're just extensions of things that are old school. So YouTube, we used to just be able to look in front of ourselves. Now we can access the world. Facebook, it's our kids now are in contact, if they're on Facebook, with everyone they've known forever. So in my book, I talk about 3 approaches to parenting in the digital age. And I'd love you to be honest with me and tell me which one you think you are. So the first one is the stick your head in the sand and wish it would all go away. There are some people like that. Raise your hand, say it loud, say it proud. Do you think that's a healthy way to do it? The problem is, especially as they get older, you won't be there to parent them. Okay, here's the next one. This is, by the way, that's my partner, Karen Glass, over there, and she came up with this. Since it is now the 21st century, it used to be called helicopter parenting. It is now called drone parenting. And this is a drone parent. She filters, she monitors, she watches everything. Did anyone see the movie Men, Women, and Children? It's a really good movie to sort of get an idea about what parents' reactions are to the digital age and how kids care about this stuff. I write about it in the book too. She is an over-monitoring, over-controlling parent, and there are some devastating consequences. And then lastly, of course, there's the media mom and digital dad, which is what I advocate for. It's a reasoned, calm approach. Media's not going away. Get the facts. Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't be a drone and overprotective. Be involved, but also let them embrace this stuff because they're going to need it. So here are my 4 recommendations. I have In the book, there's tons of stuff. Every time I give a talk, depending on the age of the kids, the parents, this one I'm assuming you have younger kids, I talk about all sorts of stuff. There are all sorts of tips, but these are sort of 4 basic ones that I think fit with almost everybody. So be a responsible role model. That's number 1, and I'm going to hit that hard. Think about your content choices. So in your handouts over here, the American Academy of Pediatrics just came out with some new, they're not guidelines yet, but some advice for families. And they say content, you'll see it in a second, is more important than time spent. So thinking about what your kids are using and what you're using and watching and playing is important, more important than anything. Build face-to-face time into each day, co-view, co-play, and try to stay positive. So let's start with role modeling. This is a survey that was done with 6,000 people, parents and kids, families of kids 8 to 13, and 54% of the children felt that their parents check their devices too often, and 32% of them felt unimportant when parents get distracted by their phones. I know it's really easy to look at your phone and be distracted and not be there for your kid, but they notice. They notice, and they start noticing at a very young age. And these are kids all the way up to age 13. Yes?
Does this refer to parents checking parents' own devices?
Yes.
Or parents checking?
No, their own devices, staring at their own devices, not their kids, their own devices. So here is a funny video that, full disclosure, I work part-time with Common Sense Media. They created this, and it's a national nonprofit that I love. It's a bad role model.
I need you to look more excited. Pan, up, down. But you're blocking me. You're blocking me. You are impossible. Ready? 3, 2. That's a good one. You don't look great in that one, but the filter makes everybody look great. Caption. Now we wait. Cutie pies. That's us. 65 likes and 22 shares in less than 45 minutes.
Are you missing out on real time? Learn how to find a healthy balance with technology at commonsense.org.
So, you got to think about what you're modeling. What are you doing? A lot of people post pictures of their kids on social media. Think about when they grow up to be teenagers, they may be able to find those photos. I want you to think about it and think about what your own behavior is first, because that's what they're going to learn from. I mean, it's obvious parenting, but it's really important in the digital age because sometimes we don't think about it. So to hit this home, at what age do kids first learn how to drive?
Drive what?
Nope. Huh?
Drive what?
Drive a car. 5. AAA says 5 years old. I found this out when I was taking the parent AAA class for my daughter. So if you don't want your kid to grow up to be this, don't do this. That kid is actually learning from her. Bottom line, responsible role modeling means you should prioritize face-to-face conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to never be on your device. That's unrealistic. A lot of times you're doing work. I'm on my device a lot. By the way, I'm guilty of so many things. But that when your child wants your attention, try to give it to them. You don't have to do it every single time. Often it's awkward. But, when I was growing up, when I had my kids were growing up, I said 10 minutes on the floor. All the experts would say spend 10 minutes on the floor with them, playing with them. That's still great advice. It's also great advice to put down your device for 10 minutes. Make it clear that they're your priority. Also, controlled use of cell phones. So that's texting and driving. Don't do it while you're walking across the street. Think about your own cell phone use. Model technology as a tool, not a trait. So that's my husband, Jim Uhls, over there. He is a screenwriter. He's probably very embarrassed that I did that. He is a screenwriter, and he's always on his computer. And he is working. That's what he has to do. But my son and my children didn't know when he was younger that he was working on a computer. They just saw him on the computer. So what he would do, and what's very important for you to do, is make it clear that you are using these screens when you are using them for work. Make it clear that it's a tool, that you are using it for whatever you need to do. And it could just be hanging out. It could be talking to grandma. It could be any other thing like that. But it's not just, you know, something that you're just spacing out with, or, you know, spending tons of time Googling things or things like that. And content choices, like we said, show children how to tell the difference between the good stuff and the bad stuff. So that's my second takeaway. Content matters. You know, you'll see that in the AAP thing. And I'm going to tell you about a study that I did at UCLA while I was getting my dissertation, where I looked at values in television content. So I looked at changing values in television content, and I looked at television shows from '67 all the way up to 2007 and asked people what they thought the values were. So we all know that, you know, you have to pay attention to sex. We know you have to pay attention to violence. We know you have to pay attention to all these other things. You may not always think you even have to pay attention to values, but values come across. So as you can see, and they change. In the top, does anyone want to guess what the value was in the top shows? In the top shows, it was family, community feeling. In the bottom, it was fame. And what ended up happening was, in the top shows, fame was at the bottom. It was the number 16th value in the television shows. Out of 16 values, it was at the bottom. And in 2007, when Hannah Montana came out, and other shows like the Kardashians, reality TV, it was the number 1 value. So it flipped. So it was really bizarre. And what we found as we continued to look at it is that this was just a small study in Los Angeles, and we found that the kids were picking up on the messages. So I asked them about these TV shows. I talked, and then it turned out they were using social media and actually understood that they could get an audience with social media. So at 4th and 5th grade, I did focus groups with 4th and 5th graders. They were picking up on these messages. So there are all sorts of messages they're picking up on, and it's really important for you to pay attention to it. So as I said, here's the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is just a small part of what they put in this article. Content matters. The quality of the content is more important than the platform or time spent with media. They took all the research. Some of it's in my book, a lot more isn't. They took it all and they talked to a whole bunch of researchers, and they came up with these recommendations, and curation helps. There's another great book called Click, Tap, Read that came out about apps, and it talks about this. 80,000 apps are labeled as educational, but they're labeled educational by the developer. There's no real research usually proving that they're educational. So it's important to pay attention to them if you can. And this is, how many of you guys know Common Sense Media? Okay, so you know it. You wanted a resource. This is an amazing resource. And they have an app called Kids Media that you can download on your phone. It's free, and it will give you great unbiased ratings and recommendations and lists, apps to learn creativity with, apps, you know, for all different ages. And I urge you to look at it. Who knows Common Sense Media here? Do you want, Danielle, do you want to talk about it for a second? Can you tell the room about it? Do you mind?
Actually, sorry guys,
I can't.
quick sign out. Yes, you can. Please go to the microphone and do any of your, so that goes for, I'm just going to edit this part out, but as we're filming people on GBC, for any questions, either save them till the end or use the mic.
Okay. Well, actually, Brad, will you go to the mic, and would you mind talking about Common Sense Media? Yeah, this is Brad Zacuto. He's head of school at Westside Neighborhood School, and has known Common Sense since they started.
Well, we have been a part of this organization. Actually, met Jim Steyer when he wasn't actually focused so much on the digital.
Would you just talk about the ratings? Yeah. What do you think about the ratings? Oh, sorry.
So there we go. So we bring Common Sense Media to all of our parents. It's a tool we use throughout our school community. And the ratings, what's nice about the way Common Sense Media works is they don't have a dog in the fight. It's really about providing parents with tools to make informed decisions. And we actually just had a workshop with parents where they were going through it, and parents were sharing how what they have figured out was even better. When a child wanted to know about seeing a movie, they're having their children go look up the information on Common Sense Media, see what the feedback was, and then sit down and discuss it as a family.
Yeah,
And
that's a
that
great
was
idea.
a far more powerful tool than the parent saying, well, here's what it says, so no.
Yeah, I find that too. Does anyone else want to share about it or no? It's a great resource. It's free, as I said, and it'll help you with different figuring out what great content is. They actually recommend it in the American Academy of Pediatrics. These are some other great apps. These are, this is meant to show you that all sorts of apps, you can learn all sorts of things. So one of them is about reading. You know, it actually supposedly motivates kids to read. And the other one, Daniel Taggart's Scorific Feelings, Songs and Activities, Recognize, Express, and Understand Emotions. So there's all this great content out there. And if you pay attention to the content, your kids can have fun with this stuff. You can feel good about it. I mean, obviously, balance and limits are important, but they're going to be using this stuff in the 21st century. And here's a study that just came out. It's about content impact in science, which is the premier journal for scientists, about bedtime math. And the scientists, they were actually funded by the developers, but they have no financial interest. And if it was published in Science, I trust the data. And then basically what they did was that they had these kids at bedtime do these little math problems, and they compared them to a reading group, a group that just did not do any math apps. And they became, it was as if they had spent 3 extra months in a classroom studying math. So it was very, very high effect for a short amount of time. So brief, high-quality parent-child interactions about math can break the intergenerational cycle of low math achievement. So it's, you know, there are some, as long as you're paying attention to the and that's actually Common Sense's rating. They had rated it long before the study came out, and they had given it a great rating. So bottom line, curate and check the ratings from an independent source if possible, and teach your child how to do it for themselves. Just like Brad said, when you teach your child to do it for themselves, they start to learn to think critically about this stuff themselves and make their own judgment and learn what they like and they don't like. Co-view the content, even a few minutes with them will help. Converse, use the messages in the content to draw out your family values and talk about it. Every family is different. You know, I like to say, you know, in France, you may not be people in France are not as worried about sexual content, but they may be more worried about violence. It's different here, so it's really important for you to know what you care about and what your family cares about, and use what's in the content to draw out your own family values. So, number 3, prioritize face-to-face time. So no one wants to be this family, I hope, in Modern Family, although some of us are this family more than we care to admit. And this really came home to roost for me. I mean, I've always known it, but I did a study. It was in the press quite a bit, so some of you may know it, where I looked at how I was really worried because you saw that picture of all those girls staring at these screens. I was scared they were staring at this and instead of staring face to face. So I wanted to design a study to look at it. So this study is, we looked at kids and we compared them, two sets of kids, control group and experimental. The ones on the left, these aren't the real kids, I just found these pictures, were going to school as usual. They had media out of school. They spent 4.5 hours a day out of school. That was their average. They reported it, self-report, using media. That's lower than the national average, by the way. And the other kids went to this camp, outdoor education camp, and they had no media, no screens for 5 days. And what we did is we tested them on their ability to understand nonverbal communication cues. So we did a pre and a post. So we did a test before and after, right when they got to the camp, on the Monday, first thing at school, end of the day Friday, when they left the camp. And we asked them to write down what emotions, photos of faces, which were adults and children, and they had 4 different expressions. And we asked them to tell us what the expressions were. And we did it pre and post. And we also showed videos. And these videos were very much like Charlie Brown videos. The tone was taken out, so they were like, wah, 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 wah. But, I mean, the tone was there, but the verbal content was removed. So you could hear sort of, somebody sort of sounding like they were happy or unhappy. This is a girl who got a really ugly sweater. At first she was very excited she was going to get a sweater, a present, and she was like, yeah, and then she got that. So there was transitions in emotions. So these were the two tests, and what we found is within 5 days, the kids who went to the camp improved in both measures over the kids who used the media. In other words, they better understood nonverbal emotional cues. So what does that mean? We didn't think that meant that the screens were taking away their ability to read emotional cues. We felt that the reason that they were able to do that was because, this was the New York Times title that when they wrote about it, which I thought was pretty funny, was that they were staring at people's faces. Even in 6th grade, these were 6th grade kids, they were still learning emotional cues because they spent a whole week looking at people's faces. So it's really important to make sure you build face-to-face time into your life, into your children's lives and into your own lives. So in the bottom line, look up. Kids need to practice to learn social and emotional skills. You should build face-to-face time into each day. Hopefully you do, but and especially when they're really young, you may not be thinking about this, but as they get older, it'll be harder and harder. Find spaces in your house without screens. Take longer breaks if you can sometimes, like, a couple of days, go camping, as long as you can. And of course, watch your own behavior. And lastly, stay positive. So this is a quote by Howard Gardner. He's the guy that wrote Multiple Intelligences. Does anyone know that book? It's a really good book. I loved it. It's talking about all kinds of different, not just IQ, all different kinds of intelligences. These are all some of the things we've identified as great positives. Access to information. You guys are at Google, you know that. Connect and collaborate. These are all things you know about. Community support, self-exploration, creative expression, critical thinking. These are positive things that if kids don't learn about media and the digital world, they're not getting access to learning all about these things. So I'm going to talk about video games for this audience. Video games, this is a slight aside, but I wanted to share this with this audience at Google. How many of you guys know the research on video games that's out there? Anyone? Okay, so there's a lot of research, and I do not advocate for, first of all, I don't play video games, and second of all, it's not like I think there are some people that actually have video game schools. That's going a little bit too far, in my opinion. There hasn't been much success academically, at least with some of those schools, but video games in general are not the horrible thing that a lot of parents think they are. They develop spatial skills. Do you guys know what spatial skills are? You need them in engineering, mental rotation, understanding how things move in space. You use it when you park a car. They contribute to success in STEM fields. There's tons of research on this. And girls who play video games with a spatial component, they improve dramatically in this arena. So there's actually a difference in older girls in spatial skills. But if a girl can play video games, you can almost equalize the difference. And I described several experiments about that. And there's so many positive effects with video games that the American psychologists did a whole article on the positive benefits of video games. Many positive effects, but when parents are surveyed about what they think is the worst media, video games are always at the bottom. At the top of the worst media. The other thing I want to talk about is, so there's gender differences. We know there's the Pew study just came in. Boys are more likely to play video games. 85 to 90% versus 60%. Why? Is it genetic? I have a boy and a girl. I certainly see differences. He likes video games. She doesn't. She plays on her phone. Or is it socialization? I don't think we know. We really actually don't know. But I Googled for this talk, Google Images, a picture of girls in video games, and this is what came up. All those pictures aren't exactly inviting to me. I wouldn't, there's not enough girls doing it. The girls that do it, they feel isolated or they're objectified. So I think we may want to think about the culture and how to change it. So this is a comic. Can we change the culture? Let's just, for the girls, and my bottom line is that if your girl wants to play video games, encourage them, and don't assume that they don't. Halo may not be the game you want to play with your either of your kids, but at a certain age, why not? So the bottom line is remember the positive, co-view, co-play, watch movies and TV with your kids, narrate your values, play games with your child, don't assume your daughter is not interested in gaming, and have fun together with them. And last, we're going to start with a quiz that came from a survey that was done a few years ago. What's the number one way kids prefer to communicate? How many people think these are adolescents? Phone call. Raise your hand. Texting. Okay, for the people who are watching, most of the room raise their hand for that. Social media. I should change this to social media, not Facebook. Could be Instagram, Snapchat. Face-to-face. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, didn't you raise your hand for 2? It's face-to-face. The good news is kids want to be in each other's company. Let's encourage that. Let's make sure they have lots of face-to-face time. 4 takeaways: model responsible media use, consider the content, family face-to-face time each day, and remember the positive. Thank you. So I'd love to take questions if anyone has questions specifically to your child, anything about the American Academy of Pediatrics, anything you have questions about. Do you have one?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting talk. The one kind of frustration point,
Yes.
quality, which you keep mentioning how important it is, and
Yeah.
I think everyone would agree. But then the real question is, what is it that makes that makes quality good? And family. You mentioned family values as one way to measure it, whether you're more comfortable with violence or with sex or what have you.
Yeah.
But there's so many other factors. I know that one of the things that really bothers me about some of the shows that my kids watch is the breakneck pace of action there. And I don't know, am I right? Is it bad? Is it not? And I don't have a lot of time to really kind of look into it and research this. So what's a good place to get information, not just the number of stars and between good and bad, but on these different
mediums. I don't know if Common Sense might have some of that information. They give very descriptive stuff. I don't know if they talk about cuts. And you asked, are you right, are you wrong? I don't think the research is conclusive either way. There was a study that was done a few years ago where they looked at SpongeBob, and they said that the person who did the study was worried that the fast cuts were going to affect children's executive functioning, which is, their ability to focus. And they did find an effect. However, it was done in a very short time period. So it was that the kids watched the show and were immediately tested. They may have found that same effect if the kid was on the playground and running around and then immediately tested for focus. It was not clear whether it was actually the show or some other circumstance. I do know not me, but somebody at UCLA tried to replicate the study to find out if they would get the same results. They did not find any effect. They couldn't publish it because most journals don't care about non-effects. I know, that's the way the world works in science. So I would say my knowledge of it, and I'm happy. I love looking at research and trying to figure it out. I'm happy to look more at that. I've heard this mentioned a few times. You mentioned it as well. But right now, I don't know if we know if there's any effect.
I gave that as an example, but there are all sorts of other things. The way the kids talk to each other in the program. There's always I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. In a way, I always feel a little bit alone when wait, this, I don't like that, or I think it conveys something wrong. But it's kind of hard to say. And it looks like so many dimensions to this
Yeah.
thing, and it's
I
hard
mean,
to.
ultimately, you have to go with your parental gut and give yourself as much information as you can. Trust your family values. I mean, there's a short period of time when kids sort of wander from your family values and they're into their friends and into media almost more than you, but then they always come back. I always give myself as an example. I went into the entertainment business. I did a whole bunch. My parents are scientists, and they only let me watch 1 hour of media, TV a week. And then I went into the film business. I studied media. That's all I ever do. And I went away from this stuff, but then I came back. I'm a scientist, I care about this stuff. You end up sort of family values trump more often than not, especially if there's a healthy environment that the child's growing up in. There's a couple people behind you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming. I just wanted to comment on that as well, just to add
Yeah.
a practical example. I would say, personally, we're very conservative with our kids' television, and I hear you on the quick cuts, but I agree with you that it's really about the content, and I can give an example. I think Phineas and Ferb is a show that's kind of fast-paced, but it's really educational, and I don't really find it to be in the same realm as a SpongeBob or some of these shows where it's like, wow, if I talked like that in the 80s, I would have gotten in trouble, but
Right.
it's kind of mainstream culture now.
Yeah.
So I would also talk to other parents, in addition to the web example you gave. We talk to parents a lot. I was going to ask you a question about young kids,
Yeah.
since probably everyone here is either going to have kids or has really young kids. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old. And I don't know the exact research, but in a lot of our social groups, people quote things like, children under 2 really shouldn't have screen time at all. It's best for them. And if you have an older sibling,
Right.
that's tough, but for a first child, it's not that hard. And after that, 2 hours a day, which, as you mentioned, is way below the national average. We try to stick to that. Obviously, we're not perfect, but your thoughts on smaller children? And I mean, our thought as a family is they will learn how to use an iPad and an iPhone and have their own phone and ignore us at some point,
They
probably
will.
by the time they're 8 or whatever, but they're at 3 and 6.
Yeah.
I really do want to limit it
Yeah.
severely.
Yeah.
And I don't really see that as being a disadvantage when they
No.
get older. So your thoughts on really small children?
I mean, I think that again, every family's different, and I think if you are able to limit your child and you feel that that works better for your family, kudos to you. The American Academy of Pediatrics did say under 2, no media. But then what ended up happening was when they published this article that you'll see, they sort of stepped back from that because there's really no evidence that kids are irreparably harmed if they have a little bit of screen time. There's a study I quote in there. It doesn't even affect language learning up to an hour a day under 2. So, I think 15 minutes, 30 minutes, if you're in the room or if you have to take a shower, send an email, there's nothing wrong with it, especially when the kids are older. It's so much harder when you have older kids because they're used to watching it. But it is probably wise, especially when they're young. Make sure they have lots of face-to-face time, moving their body. Motor skills are really important, but don't feel guilty. That's really, I think, the research doesn't back totally limiting it and not having it at all. But if you can, good for you.
I have 2 questions, if I may. One is something you touched on. My understanding, for example, was that there was a more recent study about cognitive fatigue that showed that longer time with fast-paced media affected cognitive abilities. The question is more, do you have a recommendation on a resource that would list current understanding of impact and the level of degree that scientific community treats this as an acceptable fact versus there was a study we need to look at.
So you're talking
less
about the
more.
fast cuts, and
No,
if
well,
they're
I'm actually talking more generally,
Yeah.
understanding like there is a lot of hype out there
Yeah.
about fast cuts, violence in media, baby Mozart. There are a lot of
yeah. Well, I mean,
hype. There are some studies, and it's very hard
yeah,
to.
it's very hard to know. I mean, my book has a chapter in it for very early learning, and I do summarize quite a bit of the research. There's also, Lisa Guernsey wrote a book a few years ago. I can't remember the name, but it was about screen time in early childhood, and she also summarized the data. I am happy to go and see if I can find, I mean, the resources in terms of finding out about the content, I mean, I love Common Sense Media. There's Kids in Mind. There are a few other sources, industry sources as well for figuring out. But, you know, to get the level of detail of what you want, I think he was right. Ask other parents too. I mean, form a group with other people. There's enough people in this room. You can say, what do you feel okay about? What do you not feel okay? You can also talk to schools and preschools, if your kid's at preschool, about content.
But I meant more scientific consensus rather than anecdotal evidence or impact of a single study. There is no current authoritative source you would recommend
I mean,
going
the
to
American Academy
of Pediatrics?
Yeah,
or
I mean, if that's, there's also, I mean, I was at a conference last week called Children and Screens. We're going to do, I wrote the social media paper. There are going to be working papers that will be published on a whole bunch of topics about this. The Society for Research in Child Development, which is a psychological organization, we're going to do a whole conference on that. There's going to be more and more information. The issue is this stuff moves really quickly. Research moves slowly. So it's hard to figure, and research costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. And for it to be controlled, you know, in a perfect world, it's challenging. So, you know, it's not there yet, all the evidence. We don't know. But that most of the evidence, the American Academy of Pediatrics is very conservative. You know, they were the ones that said no media under 2. And they've changed their guidelines because the evidence does not support being totally distant. And we've gone through this again. That's how I started the talk. You know, we've gone through this over and over again. We adapt. And as parents, the one thing I never say is, you know, and I didn't say here, is we need to step in and not be afraid of this. And that's why I say, you know, be a media mom and digital dad, parent online as well as offline. Sorry. Hi.
Since the screen's closer and brighter than maybe a TV, is there any studies that show the effects of vision over time?
Yeah, you know, I did see one, and I don't know the details, that said they, and I hesitate to say it, but I will since I already brought it up there. I did see something about becoming more nearsighted. There is now also a lot of studies about the blue light and sleep, and that if you read a device with blue light, you know, an iPad, not the Kindle, but iPad or computer, it affects your melatonin production, so it's harder to go to sleep. They're small samples. Nothing I've seen, my own experience has not convinced me of that. I read my iPad right before sleep and I sleep, but there is gathering evidence and it may prove to be true. Do you have any other advice with your 4 children and older children? Do you want to go to the mic?
I sometimes wonder about the proposition that kids love to socialize more face to face.
Yeah.
Seen all 4 kids of mine ranging from 15 to 23 that they're on their screens, it seems, more than they're socializing.
Yeah.
And so that data point that you have doesn't jive with my
own
reality. And I was wondering, the question is, you know, and a lot of neuroscientists think about this all the time and write books about it. What impact is there downside to the screen time that they're spending when they're not learning how to socialize?
Yeah, I mean, that's what that camp study sort of was if they're not looking at they need to look at faces to learn, to have social learning and emotional learning. But the question is the screen itself taking away that learning? Are they not learning anything? And especially when they're really young, they don't learn anything from screens. That's what the baby Einstein study was. You know, they don't learn about language. It takes them 2 to 3 years to really understand that the screen gives them any understanding about the real world, any information about the real world. But as they get older, with the internet active, FaceTime and things like that, they can learn through that stuff, even probably emotional understanding. It's just not as good as face-to-face. Face-to-face is, you know, the gold standard. In terms of your children and your own experience, that study was prefer, so they said prefer, and it was self-report. So that doesn't mean that they're doing it, it just means they're saying they prefer it. I do think that sometimes this device has been made, it was created by introverts, and introverts tend to love this stuff. I'm an introvert, my whole family's an introvert, we love this stuff. So sometimes it might feel more comfortable socializing through a screen than in face-to-face. Face-to-face can be really hard. And that's not necessarily bad. You can still learn social skills online. They may not be the same kinds of social skills, but they may be 21st century social skills. So, I mean, again, you really need time off the screen, but this device, you know, our society has been so focused on extroverts. You know, to be able to have a way that introverts can feel more comfortable communicating, I don't think it's necessarily the downfall of human life. Even though my own study found that, you know, kids improved after 5 days, what I took away, and Sherry Turkle just wrote about this in the New York Times, and she mentioned my study, and what she said was that it showed resilience. That kids, after just 5 days in a camp, putting this stuff down, got better. So it's not going away, it's just we need to change things. Yes, Brad?
So 2 thoughts, I'll give them to you and then love your response. And I don't come from this world, I come from the world of education, so I'm working with all these kids, watching them gravitate to their devices. So first of all, you know, it strikes me that screens and content flowing through screens, seeing a movie that someone else has sort of created the visual images for you, it's a little easier pathway. And whether it's moving kids to doing what's harder, which might be face-to-face, because when you do communicate face-to-face, you get response, you get reaction. Whereas when I can do it in front of a screen, I don't need to worry about monitoring that. And I think the same thing holds true, you know, the piece you showed me before, and again, that has struck me is the video of the young children. And I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who loves books, that's the good thing, but she loves that iPad, or anybody brings out a phone, she's like a moth to a light. And I think, you know, we are a K-8 school, we're actually looking to add a preschool because we realize that imprinting, you talked about Steve Jobs and the OS, I like to think it is reversible. I think that if you can work with kids early enough, that you can begin to build those other skills that are vitally important, along with all the pieces that we know that want to have in the digital world.
I totally agree, and I especially think at very young ages, it's really, really important. But I would say, I agree that you know, some people think imagination and creativity is being affected. We don't know for sure yet. Maybe it is. America is pretty innovative, though. The book is also one way, and it's someone else creating the story. So, you know, but yet we're like, yay, they're reading. So I just question, you know, that thinking sometimes. The one thing I would say about a book, although movies do this well, and I love movies, I made movies, you know, I still watch them obsessively, is books help you have perspective take and put yourself in another person's shoes. And I don't think there's any other media that can do that, although maybe virtual reality can, or maybe some new things that are coming up can, but I do think books are really important for that. But, you know, I mean, they're private, they're one way, they're reflective, and we have to realize some people like that. And I agree with you, if you're avoiding people, if your child's avoiding people by staring at this thing, and they're an introvert, and that's their natural inclination, push them outside of their boundaries. My son's like that. I push him as much as possible to be in front of people. That's not his natural inclination. But some people are like that. And, you know, there's a pathway. You know, you guys work at Google. You know, there's a pathway to a huge career for these kids that are staring at screens. So if that's who they are, you know, maybe you can find ways to support it while also supporting other kinds of socialization. Yes, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I know we're almost out of time, but you touched on video games at the end, so I thought we'd just talk about it for a second.
Great.
So again, my kids are 3 and 6, 6-year-old boy. We just started possibly to introduce him to video games, and I think your comments about how it's, you know, very male-driven and sexualized for women, et cetera. So again, going back to your comment about it being all about the content, I think Little Big Planet and Minecraft are a lot different to especially show a 6-year-old than, because of course he's going to want to play the new Star Wars game that's coming out and whatnot, but we're going to be pretty strict on that. As far as the girl, I would definitely agree with you that I'll encourage her to play those games at that time, but at 3, I still think she's a little young.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, good comments on video games.
Yeah, I didn't even have I was just getting ready for this talk, and I put in girls in video games, and I haven't paid attention to that dialogue out there, but when that came up, you know, I was just like, wow, if I'm a girl and I want to play a video game, I can't find any girls that are going to play it with me. You know, boys, the Pew Research study that just came in found out that boys use this stuff to hang out with their friends. Girls use social media. So that might just be genetic. Maybe that's it. Or is it because they can't find any other friends playing video games and they want to hang out with their girlfriends? So, you know, I think, and somebody interviewed me and she's like, I find video games really boring. And I was like, me too, but maybe that's because there's not enough video games made for us. We need more girls doing this stuff. You know, Jane McGonigal, some of you guys may know her. She's a big video gamer, gorgeous woman. Just wrote a book about it, and she, you know, we need more women like that. We need more women, you know, maybe not thinking it's going to solve every problem in the world as some people do with the video games, but, you know, getting into it, playing it early, you know, thinking about that and encouraging you'll have to push your girl a little more than your boy because she won't have peers doing it with her, but hopefully you can. Okay, any other questions? Time. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nadine.